I totally just neglected myself. I totally neglected myself. And this was one of the biggest lessons for me in prioritizing my own health and well-being and really starting to understand well-being in the broader sense of it not just being exercise and what you eat. There's so much more to it. And so I started to sort of look for alternative ways to like take care of myself. Sounds like a bit of mumbo jumbo. Somebody's going to heal me with their hands. Yeah, very good was my kind of. I was so skeptical. I look back and laugh at myself because I'm like, it's just so funny the contrast of who I was then, that version of me versus now. And I'm like, even as I talk about it, it's like these soul shivers I feel in my body because it was life changing. And it's so funny because sometimes these moments in our life that like we go through these transformations, sometimes there are things that happen over time, but then sometimes it happens in a moment. And for
Yeah.
me, it was like in that moment, I felt so changed and so connected to something. I know that there's people who are like maybe even people who are listening to this that have maybe had a diagnosis. And I just want to say, like, don't give up on yourself and don't lose faith that things can get better. Gosh, I'm going to end up getting
I,
emotional, but
I'm getting
honestly,
chills listening to you say this. Yeah.
like things can get better. And if you're open, the answers will come. They will come.
Welcome to Miraculous Transformations, conversations about powerful practices that create powerful transformations. Join me as I delve into stories of change and explore the tools and practices that have helped people navigate their paths. You might just find some you'd like to try yourself. Let's talk about transformation.
Let's talk about transformation. One of
So
my favorite topics.
I know, me too. So
Yeah.
thank you for being here. Really wonderful to see you. And I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Sandra. I'm Sandra Logan from Edinburgh in Scotland in the UK. And for work, I'm a Reiki practitioner and a spiritual life coach, and ended up on this spiritual path that I never expected to happen in my life. Didn't see half of this stuff coming. But it's been a wonderful journey. And um, I've experienced myself so much growth on my own journey, and in turn I've been able to share that with other people and to hold space for other people to heal and to grow. And it's a really beautiful thing that I'm so grateful for, which is funny because I look back through phases of my life and the challenges that I went through, and like at the time couldn't see the light in any of it, and now I look back and I'm so grateful for the way that things went in my life, and for the person that I am today. Yeah.
That's
So
beautiful. Thank you.
so
Thanks
that's
for
who I
sharing.
am.
Well, welcome. Welcome to my Miraculous Transformations show. And I'm excited to hear what stories you'd like to share today.
There is so much. And it was funny when you asked, like, oh, do you have any stories? And I thought, there are so many stories that I could share. But there's one in particular that has changed my life so tremendously that I couldn't not talk about it, at least in part of this conversation. And that is discovering Reiki Energy Healing. And for anyone that doesn't know who's listening, Reiki is a holistic energy healing treatment. And it's a holistic treatment that helps with all kinds of things, mind, body, and spirit. It really helps you to reconnect with yourself. It can help with things like physical pain, with mental illness. It can help with all sorts of things. And the reason that I actually found Reiki initially was because I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease a few years ago. I say
Okay.
a few years, it's been nearly 10 years now, and it's called Sjogren's syndrome. And at the time in my life, when I look back, I think of all of the stress that I was experiencing. I was living in Australia at the time, and the relationship that I was in wasn't the healthiest relationship. It was very turbulent. And I was in a job that, while I enjoyed it, it was quite high pressure. And there had been so much change in my life. And I was putting my body under extra pressure through physical exercise because I was feeling crappy, and I took it upon myself to be like, I must not be taking good enough care of myself. So then at the time, I was like, the solution then is for me to go and work my body harder, not realizing that then going to boot camp, 5 days a week was actually that high intensity exercise was actually causing more inflammation in my body. And my recovery time was getting longer and longer between like exercise. And it brought up so many questions around like health and well-being. And I was like, what am I missing here? Like, what am I missing? And at the time, I went through all these different tests, and eventually they found out that it was Sjogren's. And at that point, it was so funny because when I think back, I felt really validated because it was almost like, oh God, I've got an answer. Like, all these things going on in your body when you don't have an answer for them can feel really scary. And like,
Yes.
I found it really scary because it felt really out of my control. And so at the time back then, I went to a rheumatologist and was put on medication and things like that. And that was a short-term solution for where I was at in my life. But then 2016 came around and it was just an absolute, I look back as, I don't know if you've ever had a year in your life that you're like, that was a year.
Uh-huh.
Like you
Oh
look
yeah.
back and you're just like, whoa, that was a year. And 2016, it was just so much happened with me and my life and my family's health. And I ended up moving back from Australia to the UK to be with family. I had two family members that were going through cancer at the time.
Mm.
I totally just neglected myself. I totally neglected myself. And this was one of the biggest lessons for me in prioritizing my own health and well-being and really starting to understand well-being in the broader sense of it not just being exercise and what you eat. There's so much more to it. And so I started to sort of look for alternative ways to like take care of myself. And I was still on medication for a couple of years and I started looking at different holistic treatments. I tried lots of different things, and eventually I had heard of Reiki before, but I was always a little bit like, sounds like a bit of mumbo jumbo. Somebody's going to heal me with their hands. Yeah, very good was my kind of. I was so skeptical. I look back and laugh at myself because I'm like, it's just so funny the contrast of who I was then, that version of me versus now. And yeah, so I was really skeptical, and it was something that I didn't rush to do. But it came up that there was an opportunity for me to go to somebody who was a practitioner, that somebody that I trusted and knew it was a friend of mine had been to. And I thought, you know what have I got to lose? I'm just going to go and try it. Now,
Mhm.
this didn't happen until 2019. This was like at the end of 2019.
Wow. Okay. And you said the
It's,
diagnosis was in 2015 or
it
16?
was right at the beginning of 2016. So it
Okay.
was 2016, right? It was March actually, right before my birthday, before I turned 30. So that
Okay.
was a nice birthday present. And yeah, so it was a long time between then and me getting to this point of actually going for a session. And so I went in there and, I had in my head that I was like, I want to deal with the symptoms of Sjogren's syndrome. That was what I
Okay.
had. And my logical head was like, okay, I want to deal with the symptoms. I want to feel physically better. So
Okay.
there had been a couple of people over the years that I'd heard talking about it. And there was somebody that I knew that was going for regular treatments. And I thought, she's a really positive person. She seems really upbeat. She seems really happy and healthy. And I was like, this is something that I'm going to give a shot. What have I got to lose? So I went to the session and I remember going in there and having a chat with the practitioner, and she was lovely. And I was saying about all the things that I was going through, and she asked about like my emotional well-being. And I was like, that's a funny one. And my emotional health had been turbulent, to say the least, over the years. I went through trauma as a child, and there was a lot of things that I had stored in my energy field that I did not realize were still there. And prior to the session that I went to, I had gone through a really terrible breakup. It was like after a long term relationship. I had basically left my home the partner, the business that I was building. Like I literally like left all of
Mm.
it behind and was like starting from scratch. So this was at the phase of my life where I was like, okay, this is like a rebuilding. And so I went to this session and I remember lying on the bed and instantly, as soon as she started, it was like a hands-on treatment. And hands-on just means that the hands are like hovering over the body, different energy centers. Some people work with chakras, I do. Different practitioners work slightly differently, but she went around the body and I could feel intensely the connection. It was so
Wow.
profound. And I was like, I was really not in the moment because I was so relaxed in the moment, but afterwards I was like, what just happened? And I remember having this like, it was like a real emotional release. I was lying there and I had this vision and I was holding on to this rock. And I remember it clear as day. I was holding on to this rock and I was standing on a beach, and the rock represented the relationship with my ex. And I threw it into the sea. I threw it as far as and it went as far that I couldn't see it anymore. And in this session, there were just tears. I could feel them, but I was so chilled. I was lying there and the tears were just flooding down my
Mm.
face. I'm having this major release. And the rest of the session was like, it was similar in that I was having all of these like colors and visions coming through, but that was one of the big ones for me that I took away. And afterwards, I left and I remember thinking, I meant to do something with that. I felt so connected to energy. And like, even as I talk about it, it's like these soul shivers I feel in my body because it was life changing. And it's so funny because sometimes these moments in our life that like we go through these transformations, sometimes there are things that happen over time, but then sometimes it happens in a moment. And for
Yeah.
me, it was like in that moment, I felt so changed and so connected to something. And I was like, I'd like to find out more about this Reiki. I was like, I've got to find out more about it because what just happened? And I remember having like after the first session, for me, it was like quite a lot of like detoxing symptoms. I didn't feel amazing. Some people leave their first treatment and they feel lighter, they feel relaxed, and they feel free. And I felt like I was still releasing. And energy can keep working for up to 10 days after a session. So it's something that is like your energy is has been like energy has been transmuted in your energy field. And sometimes there's stuff in there that's been there for your whole life that you haven't realized. So it can take time to shift things.
Were you
Um,
prepared for that? Like, did the person, the practitioner, tell you that? Because sometimes when that happens, then you can start doubting and thinking like that wasn't good for me. So how did you work through that process?
yeah, I remember she talked to me about the detox symptoms of it.
Okay.
So she did afterwards, we like sat down and she said, you know, you might feel like you maybe have a bit of a headache or like because I had an emotional release, she said you might notice that there's like more emotions that are flooding through.
Mm.
Just let them come, let them go. Like it's all happening for a reason. Make sure to drink like the basics, like drink lots of water, avoid like heavy meals and just keep your meals light and things like that. So she gave me a bit of guidance through it. But for me, it was like the domino, you know, when you have a line of dominoes and you hit the domino, and it was like the knock-on effect of everything then in my life. It was like
Okay.
the starting point. And so after that, I ended up looking into Reiki and I decided to do the self-healing course. So that was like Reiki level 1. So there's 3 phases of Reiki. You can do the Reiki 1, which is like for yourself, and you can use that on other people and on animals and things like that. But
Mm.
there's not like a certification that comes to work with other people. And for me at that point, I was kind of like, okay, this is something that I'm going to use for myself and like find out more about it and work with it and see what it's like. So I went to the first one. Funnily enough, I actually met someone who is now my best friend. She's like wonderful. She's like a soul sister. And
Wow, that's fun.
yeah, and it was so cool because there was only 4 of us in the group. And two of us out of four have ended up having this amazing relationship. Like, it's wonderful. Sometimes the universe just puts you like where you're meant to be at the right time.
Totally.
Um, so yeah, I went and did the Reiki one and I just loved it. And it really, so that was then the beginning of 2020. After that, it's funny because I look back and have a bit of a laugh at how, like, I mean, 2020 for everyone was like transformational, right? But
To say the least, yeah.
yeah, but I was made redundant from my job. And this was like 2 months after I had started doing the Reiki course. So I did the Reiki one in the January, I want to say. I was made redundant in the March. And that happened pretty much overnight. I mean, we knew about COVID and stuff like that, but we didn't know what was going to happen. And at the time, I was working as a retail buyer because that was my background. I worked in retail business. So it was for a home interiors company that I was working for. It was a small business and it was brilliant, but it was the kind of job that I was like, I'm not meant to be doing this. I just knew. I was like, there's something more. There's something more that is aligned. And I just knew that. So I remember I remember going into work that day, and by lunchtime I'd packed my desk and left. And I was like, okay. And I remember walking along the beach that day, and I had this sense of peace and calm and trust that I had never experienced before. I was
Mm.
walking along and I was like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that this has happened for a reason. And like before the Reiki and stuff, I'd sort of dabbled in spirituality. So I'd been to meditation class, I'd done my own meditations, I'd started journaling. Journaling's been something that I've done on and off since I was a kid. Like, you know, when you were a kid, I don't know if you had like your secret diary that you had the little lock on and stuff.
Totally. Yep.
My secret diary.
Yeah.
You were only ever like talking about your mum or dad or boys or whatever. Um, and journaling for me now is like a daily practice. But you know, I dabbled in these things, but I hadn't at that point, I hadn't been through anything that was like life changing. I didn't think it was all like gradual steps. And then 2020 was like it brought after doing the Reiki one, I had this like really life changing spiritual awakening where all of my old stuff, well, I thought all of it, but it turns out there's many phases to spiritual awakening, as
Sure.
you'll
Yeah.
know. And there were many phases that have come after that. You know, if that was the end of that, then that would have been wonderful. But so you have to laugh at it, don't you? Sometimes the darkness, you can't have the light without dark, right? But I went through these dark nights of the soul, and I really I started to really invest in my spirituality in my spiritual side. And I say my spiritual side as though it's like something separate from us. But you know, I started to understand that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And that was something that I kind of knew, like I'd always believed in energy. So I was like, you know, energy is something that can't be created or destroyed. And like I remember having these conversations with friends and things where I'd be like, you know, if people were like, oh no, once you die, you die. And I'm like, how can that be? Because we are made of energy. So where does that energy go? You know, and
Right.
that was always a question on my lips. I was like, you know, where does it go? And so I'd always sort of been open to it. Maybe it's me being a Pisces as well. It's like my intuitive side. Um, but yeah, I went through this awakening and then I realized I was like, you know, I'm meant to be of service in the world.
Mm.
And this healing stuff is a part of it. And so I went on to do my practitioner training and became qualified October, I want to say it was. So it's been over 4 years now of practicing Reiki, which has been wonderful to be able to share that with other people and like witness their transformations. like be on the journey with people. It's really cool. Um,
Did you
and
ever go back to the person, or did you just do that one session and then you dove in? That's so cool. That's
isn't
great.
that wild?
Yeah.
I actually look back and I'm like, whew. But it was like she was she was the person that was supposed to, she was
Yeah.
like the guide for me. And sometimes we have a guide that's there for one session. Sometimes we have a guide that's there like for the rest of our lives that we're like, I'm going to go back to that person for forever. And it's so funny because I look back at all the people that I've worked with over the last few years, and I think there have been certain people that have come for just one session. And then there's other people who have been, people that I've worked with consistently for years. And it just depends on the individual.
Yeah.
But for me, I never felt drawn to go back. It was almost like she was guiding me back to myself and like a
Oh,
remembering.
that's
That's what it
cool.
felt more like. So yeah. And like in terms of like my overall health and well-being, I came off the medication that I was on, and I really started to notice the importance of stress and how it impacted my body. That was
Mm.
a really big one. Also, the emotions that I was carrying and how I processed my emotions. Because I'd been somebody over the years, like as a child, I learned to suppress everything. So I was always bottling everything up. And I
Mm.
would be the person that was like, that people would come to and they would open up to. But I really struggled to like let things out. So a big learning curve for me on my spiritual journey has been mastering my emotions so that my emotions don't master me. And that has
What a
been a
great way to put
really
it.
big one, a really
What
big
would
one.
you, so when you say that, going through that process, do you have tools that have been impactful for that, or does it all come back to Reiki? Like, is it the
Reiki
Reiki
is
that
like,
facilitates that?
so Reiki was almost like the gateway for me. Um, I call it like a spiritual toolkit. Like I've got, if you open up your toolkit, I'm like, what am I going to work with today? So there's lots of different tools that I work with. So meditation is one that's like a
Mm.
daily practice for me. Meditation is just starting my day with meditation. I'm just like, just life is so much easier. It feels so much easier. The heaviness that you feel, like meditation for me is just that way to come back to center, and it sets a tone for the day. It
Mhm.
really does for me. I notice how different I respond to things in my environment when I haven't meditated. And that for me, if I'm ever out of the practice, that's the reminder for me, like get back to meditation. Like that's the thing. Um, so meditation is something, sometimes I combine that with Reiki because that's something for me that's really important as a practitioner, is to make sure that my energy is in alignment. When I'm holding space for other people, is that
Hmm.
I'm a clear channel. I want to be a clear channel for people. Um,
So am I
and
understanding correctly that you are practicing Reiki on yourself
yeah,
to do that for other people? So how is it different when you practice it on yourself versus, I mean, like you said, that you laid down on a bed and she held her hands over you. So when
yeah,
you practice it on yourself, are you also moving your hands around and stuff like that?
yeah. Sometimes I do. Sometimes, like, so for example, like with Reiki, it's all about your intention for the session. So for me, sometimes it will be a matter of like if I'm doing a heart healing, if I'm focusing on a heart healing, let's say, I'll just hold my hands on my heart and I'll feel the connection between my
Mm.
heart chakra and my hands. And the energy for me, how it shows up, like it can feel almost tangible sometimes. And so that's it. Like if it's comfortable for me to do that. But if I'm doing, like, let's say, for example, I'm doing a 30-minute meditation and I want to focus on my crown chakra, I don't sit like this because I end up getting numb arms.
Right.
So in that case, what I'll do is like sometimes I'll just hold my hands out and visualize with my eyes closed in the meditation, visualize that I'm sending the light, or visualize that my hands are on the top of my head. Um, and it's wild because you feel it. You feel it.
Cool.
And you're like, your hands aren't even there. Your hands are maybe here. And it's like, it's amazing. It's so much fun to work with now as well. And like that's the thing about Reiki is it's not just something that's been like a healing thing for me. Like it's part of my everyday life now. I
Mhm.
use it I've used it with my dog and with like my partner. I've used it out when I've been, passing a field with horses in it, and there's a horse that I can sense that it needs some healing.
Oh,
So I've
cool.
stood there and I've just said out loud, and people might think that's crazy. And see if you'd said, Sandra, 5 years ago that one day you're going to be standing at the side of a field giving Reiki energy healing to a horse, I would have said, very funny. That's a good one. So it's so funny to think like how much we can evolve, because 5 years really is a short space of time when you look over the course of a full life, you know.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, like in that circumstance, like I was stood at the edge of the field and I just said to the horse, I said, if you'd like to receive some healing, then come over and you can stay as long as you want. And once you're ready to go, go. I ended up there for half an hour. I was stood at the side of the field. The horse came
The
over.
horse came over.
Eyes. I have a video because there was one point that as I had one hand out, I was like, I need to get something just to capture this because I was like, this is such a beautiful moment that I'm
Yeah.
sharing with the horse. And its eyes were going. It was getting so relaxed, and it was so beautiful to see. Like it's like one of my favorite Reiki memories, and I think you know it was just that I was in the right place at the right time. So it was really cool. So it's
That
like
is
it is,
so
it's part of
cool.
my everyday life. If I see a bee that's struggling sometimes, I'll give a little bit of Reiki to the bee. I love animals and plants and like nature is part of us. So it's a
Oh yeah.
nice way I feel for like me to give back as well, which is really cool. So yeah,
It's so funny that
the
so
bee.
what part of the reason I wanted to do this, have these conversations is because I love to hear about these different things that people are
Mhm.
doing. And so I thought like, oh, wouldn't it be cool for people to listen to these conversations and find inspiration to maybe try a meditation practice or a journaling practice or try Reiki, by listening to how it's transformed or changed somebody's life. And I am sitting here going like, as soon as I get off this call, I want to look up Reiki
I
level
want to
one.
look up
Like
Reiki healers.
I'm ready. I want to do it.
It's so cool. It's what the kind of thing that I'm like, if you're ever, I always think that people feel called to it or people come across it at the right time. It's like I am a firm believer now in divine timing of things. And I think if there's like a little niggle that's like, go and like have a little look, just see what's out there. Um, because there's like different ways to receive Reiki as well. Like going to an in-person session is like it's like going for a massage, right? It's like a
Mhm.
for your soul. You could think of it like that.
Mhm.
But it's not like a physical thing, you when you're lying there, you're fully clothed and the hands are just like over the body. And the practitioner generally, at least I do, will always ask, are you comfortable with touch? Like if let's say there's like a lot of healing around the knees or on the top of the head. Some people aren't comfortable with that, and that's totally fine. And then there's distance sessions, which is the next thing that blew my mind was that you can do a distance session with someone. So that means that wherever you are in the world, you can receive a healing, which is then you can just find the right practitioner that speaks to you. And then it's like, you can do it. So I do distance sessions. So I do them on Zoom. For me, I prefer to see like people face to face. Like I love to chat. I love to like get to know my clients and things like that. So it's really nice. Some people do it over phone. Some people can do it like a scheduled one as well. So Einstein called it the entanglement theory. And it's whereby like two particles of energy can exchange information despite the separation of distance and time. And this whole concept really blew my mind because it's like, our logical brain can't get around that. You're like, sorry, what? Like, draw that out for me. But when when you've had a distance session, or when you've given a distance session, in my case as well, the energy is palpable, and people can feel me working with their energy despite being hundreds of miles away, which is wild. So
That's amazing.
it's really powerful stuff. It's really powerful stuff. And for people, if anybody is curious, it's finding the kind of treatment that would be right for you, because it's very different. Like for me, I'm working with people who are like in the comfort of their own home. Sometimes maybe they're not in a position that they can get out, maybe physically, or maybe it's that they work from home and they don't have time to like go out and get a session during the day or whatever. Everybody has different life circumstances. So it's something then that you can like fit into your day. But then there's some people that really like to go for a treatment. Like I know myself, like I love to go for a massage. I love to go for a facial, like to go to a nice spa and to be in a room where you can just go and forget about everything. And you're not at home thinking about, oh, I still need to do the washing or I still need to do that. But it depends on the person, and it depends on the practitioner as well, because the practitioner and the energy of the practitioner, I think, is really important, that you feel some sort of connection. So you can do a little research, or you can have fun with the universe and be like, I'm just going to like send out this intention that I want to try Reiki, and send me the right practitioner. And then like see
Yeah,
what happens.
I love
See if
that.
like maybe there's like a little ad that you see on like a notice board somewhere, or the universe, like play with the universe. I'm always saying that we take it all too seriously sometimes, and like have fun with it and play with it and
I
see what
love that
happens. It's
reminder.
cool.
That's a great reminder to play, to
Yeah, to
make it fun.
play.
Yeah.
The
So
universe has a sense of humor. I think that we forget that. We can think of the universe or spirit or source, whatever feels comfortable for anyone listening to call it, is that it's a sense of humor as well, because you are it and it is you. There's no separation there. So, it's like speaking to it like a friend. I have
I
to
love
remind, I'm
that.
saying this out loud, and I'm like, this is a reminder to me too,
I
to
do that
have
all
more
the
fun with
time.
it.
All the time
Yeah,
I'm teaching something and I'm like, right, do that. Gotta remember to do that. So
yeah.
I want to ask a question. So circling back to your diagnosis, and so you went through this process with Reiki and learning to master your emotions and feel your emotions and release them and work with them. And you said that you went off all your medication. So is that diagnosis like no longer present, or like do you feel like
So,
you cured it?
so this is the interesting thing, is that my perspective on our health and autoimmune disease especially,
Mm.
has my perspective on it is shifted.
Okay.
So I remember, just to add to the story, when I went to the rheumatologist, I remember saying to her, what can I do differently to feel better? Like what can I do to like change the course of this? And I remember that she said to me, she looked at me and she said, people that are diagnosed with primary Sjogren's syndrome, you tend to feel a little bit crappy. And I looked at her and I was like, what, for life? And I was like, I left there and I remember feeling this rage. I felt this rage because I was like, somebody's just told me that I'm always going to feel like this. And I was like, I can't accept that.
No,
I,
thank
I
you.
literally, I was just like, no. And I felt like, how dare you? Like, I think back and I could remember this emotion, and there was so much coming up. And I was just like, okay, this is an invitation to like look within and look at, like, take a bit more like self responsibility. And so, over the course of the last few years, and also working with energy, I understand now how interlinked everything is.
Okay.
Our physical health is directly related to our emotional well-being, to our mental well-being, to our spiritual well-being. Like everything is connected. Nothing is separate in this. Like when I look back, I really felt like I was like, my body is betraying me. That's what it felt like. It felt like a betrayal of my body. But then it was almost like, even with that, it was like I was looking at my body as something that was separate, being like, but I
Right.
am a body. Am I my body? And then it starts this whole conversation around, well, who am I? Right? It's like, who am I? Am I my thoughts? Am I my emotions? Am I my body? And that could, we could talk about that for days. But everything's really connected. And what I noticed was that once I started to transmute some of the energy that had been blocked in my energy field, once I started to work through the trauma, shift the emotions, start to rebalance, and also connect with myself on a deeper level, I realized that this was all leading me back to myself and my personal power. It was like all paths lead home, all paths lead home. And it's something that, so now like I look at things like autoimmune disease, and there's so much that's linked to that. And I know that there's people who are like, maybe even people who are listening to this that have maybe had a diagnosis. And I just want to say, like, don't give up on yourself and don't lose faith that things can get better. Gosh, I'm going to end up getting
I,
emotional, but
I'm getting
honestly,
chills listening to you say this. Yeah.
like, things can get better. And if you're open, the answers will come. They will come. Sometimes it's not overnight. It took me years. It took me years, and I'm still on the journey. I'm still on the journey because it's like our well-being is a lifelong thing. Learning to
Right.
take care of ourselves in ways that are really good for us, because a lot of us grew up in places that in homes and environments, and we weren't taught how to take good care of ourselves. We weren't taught how to process our emotions in a healthy way. We weren't given the tools because often the people that were bringing us up, like our parents or our grandparents or caregivers, didn't have those tools themselves. So it's a relearning. It's
Yeah.
learning, all of this is inherent knowledge. All of it is within you already. You come to this life knowing it all. And then it's like, you're conditioned over time and we
Mm.
forget things. And then it's almost like, right, the spiritual journey I see is like, let's undo all of that stuff and let's get back to the essence of who we actually are. And it is a lifelong journey, but when it comes to physical health, things can get better. And the same for mental health. I've been through depression in my early 20s. That was a dark phase of my life. And there was times that I was like, I'm not going to get through this,
Mm.
you know? And I look back at the different challenges that I've been through and I'm like, all of it was leading me back here, back here to my heart, to
Yeah.
myself. Um,
When I hear
yeah,
you say these things, I think like, thank goodness when you walked out of that doctor's office that your response was anger and rage and kind of like
mm,
indignation. Would that be the right word? As opposed to just resigning yourself to what the doctor said. And,
yeah,
I do think, as you said, we're all doing the best that we can with what we have in the moment, as was that doctor. However, I do feel that doctors have a responsibility to um, acknowledge and admit that they don't have all the answers and that we're in, like, whenever I look for a medical practitioner, I'm looking for someone to like be a partner with me instead of like
absolutely.
tell me
Yeah.
everything. And
Mm,
my dad is a retired podiatrist, and he has always said you have to take part in your medical treatments and in that whole process. Like he says you have to advocate for yourself, you have to ask questions, you have
yes.
to,
Yeah.
and he always says it's called a medical practice for a reason.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, I think that a lot of times people forget that. So I love this reminder of like, you know, take part in the process,
And
ask
also, like,
questions. Yeah.
yeah, like also trust the professionals who know their stuff. I'm not saying like, disregard everything that you hear from people who are trained and who are professionals, but also what I would say is what I said to myself is don't let anyone talk over your life because that will immediately give you a sense of losing your personal power.
Yeah. Well,
And
and you're right. A good reminder that, people are trained and are professional for a reason, and so you don't want
yeah,
to
yeah,
discount everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's not being like, you know what you're talking about. Um, no, and I think that that's the thing for me as well, being a Reiki practitioner, is that, I'm in this healing space, but I'm not saying to everybody, give up the modern medicine. That's not what I'm
Right.
saying. Is that these things can complement each other. Holistic therapies are also known as complementary therapies because they complement. And these things can go hand in hand. Like in the UK, for example, they've started having Reiki practitioners in cancer wards so that
Oh,
cancer
cool.
patients are actually also receiving Reiki energy healing, which I think is wonderful. Like that's a way that we can work together with modern medicine. But there's lots of answers out there.
That's
There's lots of
exciting.
options of things to try. And I think that from my experience, I think it's really important that you listen to the guidance within is, well, what do I want to try? What do I feel called to? That kind of
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
So
what a
lovely. Thank
ride.
you so much for your story.
You're welcome. Thank
What
you
an
for letting.
inspiration. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
been it's been really wonderful. It has, and it's not been without its ups and downs. But I think that all of these things that we go through, they shape us and they make
Mhm.
us more resilient ultimately. Um. So yeah, yeah,
Cool. Well, so thank you again so much for sharing all that. And I would love for you to share a little bit about if people are interested to know more about Reiki or um, about you, like where can people find you and look for,
yeah,
your content that you put out
yeah.
into the world.
So content wise, mostly on TikTok, which is Sandra with an extra A in the middle. So Sandra Logan. So SandraLogan. And the same on Instagram, which I haven't been as active on. I have actually admittedly had a bit of a social media break because I have been going more within.
Mm.
And it's almost like getting to the point of coming back out of the cave. So yeah, that's where you'll find me on social media though. And for sessions to book or to find out more about Reiki, I have more information on my website, which is sandralogan.co.uk, and coaching services and things like that are on there as well. So yeah, and you can find out a bit about more about me that's not all about Reiki and spirituality. I've got a little bit more about me on there too. So yeah,
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I'll make sure to put that under the video as well, the link to your
that's
website
awesome.
and stuff.
Thanks so much. Thank you everybody who's listened.
Yeah,
Hopefully
thank
there's been
you.
a little takeaway.
I hope so too. Thank you so much for your shares.
Thank you. Totally. And like I often think, so I'm like we can have an impact on the world in a positive way by sending love, like and going and even like hugging trees. Like I love to go and hug a tree
I do
and just
too.
connect with it and just be like, thank you. Thank you for keeping us alive
I
and
do too.
giving it
Yeah.
some love. And,
You know what my
like,
meditation teacher taught me? I mean, not, she didn't teach it, but she did it during our meditation teacher. So we had like a year-long training, and then you go for like, at the end, we went for an 8-day in-person intensive. And
mhm,
during that, she did this thing, and I was like, oh, so we're in the middle of a class or whatever, one of our meetings, and there was an ambulance siren passing by. And she was like, okay, let's just all pause for a second and send like love and healing energy to whoever needs
mhm,
that ambulance, whoever that that is for. And I was like,
Mhm.
duh, what a great practice. And so I do that. I try and
Yeah.
do that if I remember. I mean, when I remember every time I hear a siren, because
Yeah.
how beautiful.
Yeah, it's like that loving kindness meditation, isn't it?
Mm.
It's like
Yeah.
so powerful. It's a beautiful practice.
Yeah.
It's really funny you say that actually, because funnily enough, when I was like, I think I would have been about 14, and it was like the first job that I ever had was in this cafe, and I worked with a girl called Lynn, and I remember a siren going past, and I'm sure it was a fire engine, but I remember her saying, "Good luck." And I was like,
Oh,
who are you saying good luck to? And she said, to the fire engine.
oh,
And she was like, I always do it if there's a siren, you know, if it's an
I
ambulance
love
or if it's
that.
fire. Yeah, good luck.
Good luck.
But everything's all right. Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Because
it's
those
like just
fire,
sending with
yeah.
wishes because it's like, you know, you hope everything goes okay. And do you know, it's all these little things that if everybody did them in their everyday life, wouldn't the world just be like such a calmer, more loving and mindful place?
Well, and I like to believe that we're like, that there's a tipping point where enough people, and maybe we've already passed it, where enough people are doing those things that the momentum just, because I do feel like there's a momentum with this stuff,
Yeah, I
even
think so.
even the last couple of years.
Yeah. Like
Um,
with the rise of like TikTok and social media and stuff as well, I think like there's like word is spreading about things and there's lots of conversations starting and stuff, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, and even like you go into the stores and like all the prints on the t-shirts, a lot of them are like, an attitude of gratitude and it's earth, just things like
Yeah.
that. And it's like, yeah, like I mean, we've talked about in the States, billboards are not as much of a thing as they used to be, but there's still billboards all over the place. And we have talked about like what if every billboard had a positive message? Because you read those things
Yeah.
subconsciously a lot of times because you're driving past them and you just like see it out of the side of, and you
Yeah.
read it real fast sometimes. And like if you were just driving down the highway and it was like positive messaging after positive messaging, like
Hmm.
eh, how cool would that be?
Like imagine that would be really cool. I bet, right? Oh, that would be great if somebody studied this. Like, but imagine like the statistics of road rage and accidents on the road. Imagine they declined as a result. Like that would be
I
such
bet
a
they
cool thing.
would.
Maybe you should propose that, start a campaign for billboards to have positive messages on them. Like
There was a
there has to
movie.
be studies to support that.
Outside of I'm sure we were 3 miles from Avebury, Stonehenge. So that was super cool. And that was a synchronicity because when we were in Wells the year before, we had a car, which in the rest of our pet sits that year, we didn't have cars. Now, this past year, we went back and we had cars everywhere. For some reason, it worked out nicely. But the first year, we only had a car in Wells. And so we really took advantage of it. We went to Stonehenge twice, and we went to Avebury twice, and we went to just all over the area. And when we were in Avebury, David was like, we were standing up on the, have you been there before?
No, I haven't actually. I've
So
never been.
David's really into like the stone circles and all that stuff. And so, or the megalithic monuments and things. And so we're up on this like raised elevated area and we're like looking down on one of the bigger parts of the stone circle. And he goes, it would be so cool if we got a pet sit here next year. And I was like, and I looked and there's a little village and I was like, well, there's like 3 houses here. Like, I don't think we're gonna get a pet sit here. Like the chances that one of those 3 houses or whatever is gonna be looking for. Well, first of all, there are more than 3 houses there. I didn't realize there was like a little side street with a little village. Um, but we found this sit and they listed themselves in Marlborough. And we were like, oh, we really enjoyed Southern England. Let's look at this one. It's a month. We wanted to do ones that were longer. And so we applied for it. We get on a call with them and they were like, yeah, we're 3 miles from Avebury Stone Circle. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
Literally manifested.
So this year when we were
I
there, I
love
was
when
like,
things
David,
like
say
that
some other things out
happen.
loud. What else do you want to say out loud while we're here?
Well, David said yesterday that he wanted to find a nugget of gold, and then he found a gold brooch on a step in the town, a literal gold brooch. And I was
Amazing.
like the two of us, like, I mean, we like have a lot of giggles at the universe and the synchronicities, but that yesterday was like, phew. He
Yeah,
literally said, I would really like to find a nugget of gold. And it was so funny because it was like, that was just like plop out, it went into the universe. And then that same day,
that's so fun. I
so I'm
love
just
seeing
like,
that.
oh, I love it. I'm
I
just
do too.
like,
I'm so thoroughly entertained by things like that, which is, I think,
same.
one of the reasons why they keep happening because the universe, like you said, the universe likes to play. So it's like, oh, cool.
Yeah,
She's
I
having
know.
fun with
She's
that.
playing the game.
Yeah.
It's like the game of life and how you play it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so cool.